In this video, I present an argument in favor of a quantum-informational and holographic consciousness as the ontological foundation of reality. This proposal is based on a recent article available on Field Papers for those interested in reviewing it. Rather than offering a formal philosophical proof, the work argues for the internal coherence and viability for this metaphysical framework. It is a speculative model that integrates elements from philosophy, psychology, physical theories of consciousness, and cosmological theories. As an introduction, I propose a metaphysical approach that posits a universal consciousness as the ontological foundation of reality. This consciousness is defined as a monistic, neutral substance whose essence is conscious experience itself. Its properties include being a dynamic process, quantum-informational in nature, non-local, which can be understood as omnipresent, and holographic, implying that each part encodes the wholeness. The image contrasts dualism and monism, depicting physicalism and idealism as expressions of either mind or matter, respectively. In the neutral monism proposed here, a new substance is postulated, the conscious experience, which manifests as information through a physical substance that enables non-locality and serves as the basics of the holographic projection of physical reality. The argument is structured around 4 premises, each of which will be further developed, and a conclusion. First, consciousness has an informational basis. Second, consciousness exhibits a quantum ontology. Third, certain psychological phenomena suggest that consciousness may be non-local. Fourth, physical reality is a holographic projection of a universal consciousness. From these premises, it is concluded that this universal consciousness constitutes the ontological foundation of reality. The first premise begins with subjective experience, which is a core feature of consciousness and the epistemic foundation of all knowledge. Regarding the functional and physical aspects of consciousness, contemporary neuroscientific theories associate its neural correlates with informational processes. For instance, the top left image illustrates the global neural workspace theory, depicting distributed networks unifying after an initial ignition. And, on the right, the integrated information theory, which shows a highly integrated cortical network quantified by the phi parameter. The lower image refers to a recent article comparing predictions from both theories concerning neural correlates of consciousness. This suggests that consciousness has an intrinsic informational substrate. The second premise argues that consciousness is quantum in nature. I begin with the hard problem of consciousness as formulated by David Chalmers, which questions how material processes give rise to subjective experience. The adjacent table highlights the limitations of classical approaches like the explanatory gap of materialism, the interaction problem in dualism, the composition problem in panpsychism, and the emergence of matter from mind in idealism. The image illustrates the gap between the phenomenal mind, known as qualia, and the biophysical world, related to the easy problems of consciousness, such as attention and perception, that can be explained via neural correlations. These challenges motivate the exploration of alternative ontologies. In this context, Roger Penrose argues that consciousness is not non-computable, based on Gödel incompleteness theory. This implies that aspects such as free will, understanding, and qualia cannot be reduced to classical algorithmic processes. As a solution, it is proposed that consciousness emerges from entangled quantum states within microtubules, protein structures inside neurons. The image shows microtubules in quantum superposition in states 1, 2, and 3, which collapse via orchestrated objective reduction, a non-algorithmic process linked to gravity, as illustrated in a lower diagram. These collapses generate proto-conscious moments, whose orchestration in the brain yields conscious experience. This model implies that consciousness may reside in ontologically indeterminate quantum states, thus evading classical computation. The third premise argues that consciousness may be non-local, meaning independent from the brain. Bernardo Kastrup, in his formulation of analytic idealism, interprets dissociative identity disorders as evidence that a single brain can house multiple identities. Related to this, we may cite reincarnation cases involving possession, such as those investigated and published by Ian Stevenson, illustrated in the images. Though anomalous, such phenomena suggest that memory and identity could persist beyond the physical brain. Despite their controversial nature, these cases, now labeled as claimed past life memories, continue to be documented and seen in the recent article shown below. This implies that consciousness may be non-local. The fourth premise posits that physical reality is a holographic projection of a universal consciousness. Here we will shift from classical physics, as represented by the brain, to quantum physics with entangled states, and then to cosmological dimensions. We begin with the orchestrated objective reduction theory, which proposes that consciousness-related information is transmitted by a hierarchy of electromagnetic resonances. The top image shows physical elements and their corresponding resonant frequencies, with empirical evidence extending to amino acid rings. The bottom image represents microscopy of neurons, microtubules, and tubulin triplets, all displaying resonant frequencies. It is speculated that these resonances may extend to nuclear or even the Planck scales. For my argument, it is enough that they reach quark level within protons, as we will see shortly. At the quantum level, quantum-informational panpsychism proposes that qualia, that is the subjective experience itself, are represented by pure quantum states. It further suggests that entanglement between primary qualia generates new qualia. For example, the equation shows qualia of direction entangled with qualia of color to produce the new quale of a star. This formulation, in principle, resolves the composition problem in panpsychism. The diagram below offers a personal visualization of this theory, where greater structural complexity in physical space implies a higher degree of quantum entanglement and hints a greater level of consciousness. Both theories mentioned are compatible with evolutionary theory and abiogenesis, addressing the problem of proto-consciousness. However, neither theory provides a substrate to store non-local memory. To address this, I propose a protonic substrate, inspired by the lattice from Jacobo Greenberg's synergic theory. This substrate stores information through electromagnetic resonances and quantum entanglement at the level of quarks. Importantly, this avoids dualism, as quarks are part of known physical reality. The images show diagrams from lattice quantum chromodynamics, or QCD, a term that coincides with Greenberg's proposed nomenclature. If this protonic substrate is described by QCD, we can speculate that it may scale cosmologically via the AdS-CFT correspondence. This conjecture relates a 5-dimensional anti-de Sitter geometry to a 4-dimensional conformal field theory. The image illustrates how a 3-dimensional space can be holographically encoded in its 2-dimensional boundary, here proposed to be the protonic substrate. On the right, the substrate at the cylinder's wall generates a space-time through holographic entanglement entropy. The lesser the entanglement, the smaller the emergent space-time. Based on the previously mentioned consciousness theories, the brain projects qualia, or quantum information, holographically onto the protonic substrate at the boundary of the cylinder depicted in the diagram. This substrate enables non-local memory storage, potentially explaining the non-local memory proposed in premise 3. In this direction, causality runs from physical reality to the substrate. Conversely, physical reality within the cylinder holographically emerges from quantum entanglements on the walls containing the substrate. Here, causality flows from the substrate to physical reality. This opens the possibility that a universal consciousness from the substrate generates physical reality. As indirect evidence of this, it is worth noting that quantum fields in the Standard Model are non-local, that is, omnipresent. In summary, consciousness has been argued to be a dynamic, quantum, informational, non-local, and holographic process. It may be inferred that the totality of all conscious experiences constitutes the universal consciousness posited here, which could constitute the ontological foundation of reality. Individual minds could thus be their dissociated fragments, and physical reality a holographic projection of it. The image of the Ouroboros serpent reflects this metaphysical approach, wherein the study of the cosmos is integrated within quantum foundations, possibly pointing toward the missing physics for consciousness. Though speculative, this proposal faces several empirical and conceptual challenges. Reincarnation cases involving possession remain controversial, marginal, and hard to replicate. Nevertheless, such cases continue to draw scientific interest, particularly in psychology, as shown in the book pictured below. Orchestrated objective reduction demands physical models for electromagnetic resonances at the level of the proposed protonic substrate, that is, quarks within quantum chromodynamics. Quantum-informational panpsychism, being a new theory, requires both theoretical development within QCD and empirical validation. In the AdS-CFT framework, phenomenological evidence is needed to support the generation of spacetime from holographic entanglement entropy. Finally, this metaphysical model is a speculative framework intended to promote collaboration between philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, and physics. Thank you for your attention.